I guess I would emphasize more the way that when you cluster most of an industry on Sand Hill Road, like one road, all the investors in one place, and there's only one good restaurant and bar on the whole road, they're going to act in a pack. And that's what you saw with SVB. All the money flows into one bank because it's like one tribe rushing to the same place, and then it all flows out again, and then the bank collapses. So it's a sort of symptom of how the whole system is very bubble prone.
That's extraordinary. You've got arguably some of the smartest people on the planet doing something that you wouldn't advise anyone to do in a high street. I heard your assets, heard your pool of money that in one place. Why would these smart, amazing people do that?
Well, the genius of Silicon Valley, and particularly venture capitalists, has always been networking. It's a big network. It whispers to each other. It's kind of a whispering grapevine. And that has an upside in that you can form views about which technology is going to succeed, get behind that idea, push it, hype it, and then if it doesn't work, you move on to the next thing. And that's great for startups, but it has a downside when it comes to sort of the macro investing picture. You get the NASDAQ bubble in 2000, huge bubble, huge crash. You've had the same thing in 2022 with tech stocks going down, and then you had Silicon Valley Bank. It's all part of the same, the upside and the downside of a network.
So the venture capitalists, and let's go right to the heart of the book as well. And one of the questions you ask in the book is, well, did the venture capitalists actually create the success of Silicon Valley and of the technological boom that we saw? Or actually, they just merely show up and they were along for the ride, and actually it would have happened from different financial sources otherwise? I think that's an absolutely brilliant question. Did you get to an answer?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a great question, and it is posed in the academic literature. Did they just show up for the innovation, or did they help to create it? I come down firmly on the side that they helped to create it. Why? Because an entrepreneur is a brilliant, committed, determined individual, but needs to be connected to the first people they're going to hire, the first customers they're going to recruit. They have to have a sense of the broader landscape of innovation. And so that's what the venture capitalist does. The venture capitalist is a person who shows up with money and connections. And we all know that in life, money and connections are super important.
Yeah. But this brings me to the power law itself, which is, I'm going to butcher this and you're going to tell me, no, it's not this. But it's kind of like, if you've got 10 investments, you're not going to make all 10. All 10 aren't going to happen. But my goodness me, if one or two of those, let's say two of them, actually make it, the exponential profits and growth and success you're going to get from that, it's going to wipe the floor with all your losses from the others as well. That's kind of the power law, isn't it?
Right. And therefore, the only thing that matters is the winners. The losers, you can only lose 1 times your capital. The winners, you can make 20 times your capital, 50 times, 100 times. So it's all about shooting for that, big win. And therefore, that's why venture capitalists sometimes sound a bit crazy. We want flying cars. We want, not the next generation, but the generation after the next generation. But that's the logic of the power law. You have to go for the big wins if you're a venture capitalist.
And this brings me right back to where we started. And this is why I wanted to do this circuitous route, back to the banks. So the venture capitalists are on the hook for their losses, but my goodness me, they get their profits. But it seems to me now the relationship with the banks has made it that the banks are on the hook for all the losses. So although that 2 of their 10 bets that they're exposed to may well make success, it's the venture capitalists who will make the money from that, but the banks will lose, won't necessarily make the same kind of profits from that. It will be the venture capitalists who get the upside, but the banks are now getting the downside potentially. Has the relationship between the venture capitalists and the banks made the whole thing much more dangerous?
Well, I think a Silicon Valley Bank could have been much better managed, right? And so it didn't have to happen this way. If they had, instead of making a huge bet on inflation coming down fast, which is effectively what they did with their bond portfolio, if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had this crisis. I think it's not just the venture capitalists who messed up, it's also the bankers. Yeah. But I also think that, this is part of a broader thing, that entrepreneurs and venture capitalists in Silicon Valley believe in risk. But then they apply that to everything, including their banking relationships, which they shouldn't, and including if you take Travis Kalanick and Uber and where he went off the rails, that was partly because, hey, we don't really need, a legal function. We don't need a proper chief financial officer. We can just wing everything.
Hang on. Hang on, you said Travis Kalanick. You're talking about Uber, but that sounds like someone else who's, dare I say it, taken a massive punt on a formerly Silicon Valley company. Perhaps one would argue if it's still there or not. And that's Twitter, Mr. Musk as well. The way that he's taken away some of the key functions that the European regulators want to see and that the US would like to see, and the moderation as well, that sounds remarkably familiar. Or am I drawing too many conclusions?
No, you're totally right. So this is the risk appetite, which is a wonderful thing in some avenues if you channel it the right way, but then a disastrous thing in some other domains. So, you know, Musk goes in, he has this kind of crazy sort of Cavalier attitude. I'll buy Twitter basically for fun.
Yeah, I'll blow $24 billion, doesn't matter.
Whatever. And then it turns out that actually other people have thought carefully about content moderation and what it is to be a steward of that in a democratic society. And he basically hadn't thought about it because he's so happy to take risks.